Hey everyone, and welcome back to a new video. Today I'm here to talk to you about how to start to learn a new language on your own. So if you want to know, then just stay tuned. Alright, let's get straight up into this video. You might be at a point where you want to learn a new language but don't know where to start. So I'm here to give you a step-by-step guide on how you can start learning a new language. And that goes for any language you like to learn. The steps I'm going to mention in this video are definitely steps I took when I was learning a language on my own. That's why I'm really convinced that they will help you too. Alright, first thing you want to do when learning a language is, of course, to determine which language you want to learn. And when determining which language you want to learn, you want to determine what's your motivation behind wanting to learn that language. That's a super important step. I have several videos on this. I have videos on why you're struggling to learn a language. It should pop up right here, where I'm explaining exactly this phenomenon that people are struggling because they don't really have a motive to learn a language. So if you don't have a motive, it will be a bit harder to learn it. It will be harder to stay and keep up with it with your learning routine. So I always advise having a motivation and knowing your motivation behind wanting to learn a language. You could just be interested in a language. You could want to learn a language because of work, school, whatever your motives are. It is so important to know what the motive is and to have a reason behind wanting to learn something, because this is ultimately what will push you and what will keep you going when at times you might not be as motivated, which will definitely kick in sometimes. So you always want to have this motive ahead of you and know that this is the reason why you want to learn the language. I can put the reason on you. Anyone could have a different reason for wanting to learn a language, and this is your personal choice, to be honest. I also have a video where I mentioned the most important languages, and people were telling me, well, you didn't mention this language or that language. Well, I mentioned in this video that the most important languages for me. So any language could be important, really. If a language is important to you, then you have a motive and reason to learn it. Maybe whatever reason, that's your personal thing. But just have your motives in mind whenever you're wanting to learn a new language. Alright, second step with learning a new language. Now that you've decided on which language you want to learn, now that you know that you want to learn that language and for what motive and reason, it is important to set a goal. Setting goals will also keep you ultimately motivated to keep pushing, to keep learning, to keep going for that goal. If you don't have a goal, then it will be definitely more difficult to be motivated. And having a goal doesn't mean necessarily to have a study routine per se, but having a goal just means to know where you want to go, where you want to head. That's important, because if you don't have a goal, then you don't know where you're heading, and that's valid for everything in life, basically. So having a goal will definitely make things easier in terms of knowing which direction you're headed to and knowing what you want to learn in what set amount of time. But with creating a goal, I'm not telling you to put crazy deadlines, like to put a whole lot of workload on yourself and be fluent in 2 months in Japanese. In no way am I saying this, but it's just important that you set mini goals, and once you reach those goals, you set other goals that keep you advancing. Now, once you've set your goals, you know which language you want to learn, you've decided on your objectives and maybe on your deadlines too, it is super important to find, of course, the resources. And resources are also different for every single person. Luckily, we have the internet nowadays. We can find resources in any and every form out there possible. So it is super easy nowadays to find resources, to find especially free resources, to find resources that are not only available in your country but also elsewhere. Before, you basically had to go either to the library or you had to go buy books. That's what I did like years ago when I started learning languages on my own. I went and bought books. That's the main thing you did when you wanted to learn a language. You just went to a bookstore and bought a grammar book or whatever book you wanted to use as a resource for that language. And nowadays, you have so many resources available through the internet. You don't even have to buy books anymore. But I still find having a book really necessary to have all the information, like for example grammar, to have all the grammar at once in one book. It will make your life way easier to have, for example, 1 or 2 grammar books that you always recur to when you want to study grammar in that language that you're wanting to learn. So I did the same thing. I always just bought like a grammar book, and then I had, for example, listening and speaking exercises. So like a textbook and a grammar book. That's the most simple thing you could do, to have a grammar book and have a textbook in the regarding language you're wanting to learn. So according to the level you're learning, in this case it would be beginners because you're just starting out. So the beginners level always has a grammar book. Then you want to start, for example, with A1, which is the European Common Framework of Language Learning. So you have, for example, A1, A2, and then it goes on to B1 and B2. Yeah. So those usually A1 to A2 are absolute beginners. You would have a grammar book for A1, for example, and then you go and continue on to A2. For every level you have a grammar book as well as a textbook to do exercises. And this is something that helped me out tremendously, to have books I can recur to whenever I wanted to know something about grammar. Of course, you could also look up things on the internet, but having everything combined in one book makes things way easier. So I, for example, have this textbook in Spanish, which I use to teach my Spanish students on my retreats. So we have this textbook, which is level A1. And then we also have like a grammar book with this textbook. Just like that, I had the same thing when I was learning Portuguese, for example. I bought just 2 books. I just went into the bookstore and I was like, I want to learn Portuguese. So I headed for the language learning section, and there I just found Brazilian Portuguese books, textbooks, as well as grammar books. So I just picked up 2, and those were the only books and resources at the time I used in the beginning. As time went on, I started incorporating other resources. But in the beginning, like I think the first 2 months, it was literally just 2 books I used to learn the language. I first had the textbook, which I don't have here now, but I will insert it here somewhere so you can see it. Also, I have every single resource I used linked under every video, so you can just go on if you want to learn French, Spanish, Portuguese, like whatever language I speak and learned. You have the textbooks I used to learn that language down below in the description box. So definitely go and check the description box if you're looking for good books to learn the languages I just mentioned. So let's get back to what I was saying. I had those 2 books, and that was good for 2 months. I used just straight out those books. For example, I started out with unit by unit, and then always did the grammar exercises with that. And that was fine. Like for the first 2 months, I only did that, and I absolutely learned a lot. And I specifically did that because I wanted to focus really on getting the grammar in, getting the basics of the grammar. And from there on, I had a foundation, and from there on, I worked my way up. And that's what I did in all the other languages as well. So having a solid foundation is key here. And with that solid foundation, you have to have clarity, and that's easier if you just use the minimum of resources in the beginning, which are basically just your books you need. With your books as a first resource, you also of course want to have a dictionary. Also, having dictionaries in book forms is good, but nowadays you can also have online dictionaries, which are apps even, which are of course a little bit more handy, you know, than having like this like huge thick dictionaries. So when using dictionaries, I always recur to online dictionaries. So of course you can have manual, like physical resources, just as well as digital resources. And I think the digital resources nowadays are way like bigger to explore than manual resources. Of course, you can also always go to the bookstore and get books and stuff, but I think it's way easier, especially if you are in a place where you can't have physical access to those books. It is easier to access them online. So digital resources could be apps, it could be music, could be social media, could be series, like so many things I always talk about. And if you want to know, I also have a language learning playlist where I have tons of videos where I give you resources on what you can do. One app I started using when learning languages on my own is definitely BABBEL. BABBEL is a great app if you want to also reinforce that grammar, because having books, of course, in the beginning is great to learn all the basic grammar, but then you also want to kind of like deepen the grammar knowledge. So having an app where you can put that onto tests is also great, and BABBEL is great for that. And from there on, you can also train your listening skills and writing and reading. Another way to go is actually have a tutor. If you feel like you can't really advance that much on your own, you could also get help from a professional tutor, from someone native who speaks the language, who teaches the language, who knows all the tricks and tips to give you when learning the language. So it is always good to have a tutor. I also even had a tutor when starting to learn Portuguese. I got myself a tutor. It was an exchange, kind of like she taught me Portuguese and I would speak with her English. If you definitely want to learn quicker and faster, having a tutor will make the difference. Having a tutor that customizes their lessons specifically around your needs and around your wants is super important to meet a deadline, for example. If you just want to take a step ahead, then definitely get yourself a tutor. And RYPE is one great app to do that. On RYPE, you can get a tutor in any language you're learning, any language, there are no limits. So just check the links down below to BABBEL and RYPE, where you can definitely advance your language learning game. So with the resources, it's of course important to determine what kind of learner are you and what do you want to learn. Do you want to learn reading, writing, speaking, or do you want to improve your listening? Like, what is your main focus? Because not everybody wants to learn how to write necessarily, for example. People may just want to learn how to speak and that's it. But with your goal, you of course also have to determine what you want to learn. And with that, you also have to know what kind of learner are you. In other fields, what kind of learner are you? Are you more a listening person? Are you more a visual person? Do you learn better writing? Do you learn better reading? So your learning style also determines your success level in learning that new language, because everybody obviously has a different learning style. Everybody receives differently. Some people receive better by listening. Some people receive better visually. So you kind of have to figure out your learning style overall to determine what kind of resources will be best for you. Of course, in the beginning, it will be the more basic resource, just like I mentioned, like the books. But as you go on, you determine your own resources. So it could be anything. No resource is valid or not valid to learn a new language. You are the one who determines which resource works for you. Every time I talk about different resources, I always mention that it is what works for me, in hopes that it might work for some of you out there too. And I can't guarantee that everything that worked for me will also work for you, because obviously I'm a different type of learner than you might be. I, for example, don't have a study routine. I never had one. But still, I managed to learn all these languages. But other people, other polyglots, may have a really rigid study routine, and they also manage to learn all these languages. So here you clearly see there's no right and wrong here. It is definitely dependent on you and what your learning style is. I know that I learn best when I'm motivated, when I learn spontaneously, when I learn driven by my own will. That always kept me going, driven by what I'm passionate about. That's why I always try to incorporate language learning in things I'm passionate about, and also in my everyday life, everyday things I would do anyways. But other people might not do the same thing. Other people might just sit down 2 hours a day, 1 hour a day, and just straight up study. But I always knew from the beginning that that was not for me. So I tried and figured ways around that, and figured ways to make it more suitable for me. And it definitely worked. So my point here is that you want to try and figure out what learning style fits and suits you best. Next thing I would advise when starting out to learn a language is definitely to start out incorporating that language in your everyday routine and what you would do anyways. I have a video on that too, on how to learn a language from your home, but that is basically valid in all points, not only when you're at home. That is essentially to tell you that you should start incorporating that language. May it be just setting your phone in another language, may it be just starting to listen to foreign music, or starting to follow social media in the language you're wanting to learn. Follow different bloggers, follow different celebrities, whatever you're interested in. Follow people who you're interested in and who speak your target language. So I do that up until now. I follow so many different people. I don't just follow people who speak English. I follow people who speak Portuguese, who speak Spanish, who speak German. Whatever language I speak and I'm interested in, I follow people on there. So nowadays on social media, it's so easy to find foreign bloggers or celebrities or whatever you're looking for you to follow. In the beginning, of course, you might not understand what they're saying, but this just gets you accustomed to how the speech pattern is in that target language. And that is also very important when you are starting out. Another tip I could give here is start looking for different YouTube creators in different countries that are speaking the language you're wanting to learn. So if you're wanting to learn Spanish, there's so many different content creators who speak Spanish from Mexico, from Spain, like so many different YouTubers with different languages. So it should not be difficult to find someone that is in the area or field that you're interested in. If you're interested in beauty, you could find so many different beauty bloggers who speak different languages, and that is also something that will help you gradually get accustomed to the language. So those were the tips to start out learning a new language. Of course, in the beginning it might seem a little bit more difficult, but once you go on, it will gradually get easier. Trust me on that. I hope those tips were useful, and definitely if you guys have any other tips that you're implementing in your study routine, or if you have ideas of other things, then definitely leave them in the comments, because this is the space for language learners not only to listen to what I have to say, but definitely also to listen to each other. So definitely leave your suggestions or what you are doing in the comments so other people can maybe try that as well. Alright, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!